Hello again, everyone. Today I want to talk about empathy. Now, in the earlier part of my life, when I was living more monastically and I was studying Buddhism, I actually had kind of a bit of a negative concept of what empathy was. Because I had seen empathy kind of lead people astray on their human connection more than actually helping it. And this was all around attachment at the time and seeing how people attached onto their own stories and projected their reality, their experiences on other people and called it empathy. But what I realized as I progressed and I studied more was that this is because people weren't actually using empathy properly. And this comes up all the time, right? Empathy is one of those things that we recognize as society is important and powerful. In fact, some people even label themselves as empaths, which is really interesting when we think of someone who identifies with being empathetic so much that they create a title around it and call themselves an empath. Now, empathy, yes, is a powerful tool. I think of it like a chainsaw. You want to cut down a tree, nothing's going to do it as effectively or as precisely, now I'm thinking like dynamite and stuff, but as precisely as a chainsaw is going to be able to do it. And yet you can also do so much damage with a chainsaw if you don't know how to use it properly. So I'll give an example. I used to hold a lot of retreats and like share circles, and what I would often see is people thinking of, again, we hear this all the time, but they're putting themselves in the other person's shoes. And so we would be in kind of like a share circle, and you'd have one person get pretty emotional about what they're describing or what they're going through, and you get the person next to them thinking, oh man, this person looks sad. If I were sad, I would want someone to hug me or to comfort me. And so they think about themselves in the other person's shoes. What they're really doing is they're tapping into all the moments that they've been sad. They're tapping into their experience of sadness and thinking of them in that moment, instead of really thinking about the other person. And then they act upon those feelings in the way that they would want to act. So they see this other person that's sad beside them, and without even asking for consent, they would just go in for a hug, or they would place their hand on their leg or something like that. Now, some of these share circles were pretty emotionally charged, and for that individual, and I saw it happen a couple times, maybe touch was actually the absolute worst thing that you could do for that person, and they would actually have an adverse reaction. And I would think to myself, like, that other person's empathy actually just made my work as a facilitator so much more difficult, because now I have to try to recreate the safe place. So I had to start setting up all of this precedent before we would even have these circles of like, okay, no matter how you feel, and I'll say it again, like keep your hands to yourself, or keeping bodily autonomy and all of these parameters just to try to control the way that some people's empathy came out. So I've thought a lot more about empathy, and I've done more research on empathy since, especially when I wrote my last book, The Prosperity Triad, and as I'm moving into this new book of Communicate Bravely, where one of the components, the E in the Bravely model, is empathy, is talking about how to do this effectively and healthily. And that is not imagining yourself in the other person's shoes, but imagining them in their shoes to the best of your ability, and understanding that at best, all we're doing is making assumptions. All we can do is take in what we know of the person and what we know of the world around us, and we can imagine, yeah, if I were in your place, no, see, even I just fell into it. If you were in your place, this is maybe how it would feel. And we clarify, we ask questions of how can I best support you, instead of just making assumptions about how we can support. And really, the empathy is there that you are trying. The empathy is the feeling, the compassion is how you act on it, but it is the fact that you are making this effort, like, okay, how is this experience for you? And then letting that inform the situation. We can go much more into the different types of empathy, somatic empathy when we hurt ourselves, and even that unhealthy empathy that I was talking about before. But the key here, if you could just take away this principle, it's not about imagining yourself in another person's shoes. That's you taking all of your own experiences and projecting it upon the other person. It's who is this whole person, that main character in their own story, how are they in their situation? Because for me, I can think about public speaking. If it was like, oh yeah, someone just had to get thrown up on stage last minute. Okay, what's the big deal? I can go up on stage all the time. I would not be very empathetic in that situation, or they wouldn't feel like I'm being empathetic, because if I put myself in their shoes, no problem, go up on stage and talk. But for some people, public speaking is terrifying. So if I think, oh, this is a person who hates public speaking and they were forced to go up and be in front of all these people, I can imagine that would feel very vulnerable and naked. And now I'm trying to empathize, making educated assumptions with what that person experienced. And I'm hopefully going to make them feel more comforted in that process as well. It also informs us to have some of those more brave conversations and some of those bigger talks as well. So think about the way that you interact, think about the way that you view empathy, and ask yourself, am I taking my own stuff and projecting it, or am I trying to imagine them in their stuff? Play around with that, let me know what you think, and we'll catch you next time.